welcome to everyone that's tuned in. Thank you so much for being here. It's lovely to be showcasing A Tudor Christmas with Alison Weir and Siobhan Clarke. My name is Linda Hugo. I'm the founder and director of Beyond CURATED. And what we specialize in is private heritage and cultural experiences in and around London and the UK. So we're very much looking forward to welcoming everyone in person, to those again, hopefully in the not too distant future. In the meantime, we've really been enjoying hosting these wonderful webinar sessions, and actually our virtual experiences are available now as well. So that's quite exciting. We're all sort of having to adapt and go virtual with our experiences as much as we can. But it's very exciting as well, and it's great to be able to bring a little bit of a taste of London and the UK to people all over the world by means of these virtual experiences. So Merry Christmas in the meantime to everyone.
Yes.
Why not? I think it's good to start getting into the spirit. And without further ado, we're going to hand over to Alison. I believe, are you starting this evening?
Yes.
We're starting with the presentation and some music. We've got some music here, so we'll be starting with that. Yes,
marvelous.
Tudor music.
Okay, so
yes,
here
we go.
So hello, and
hello everyone.
Hello everyone.
Thank you for joining us.
Warm welcome. It's wonderful to be seeing you all tonight. And I'm just about to now share my screen with you so that we can look at our Christmassy slides. Is that fine? Everything okay, Linda?
That looks lovely. Thank you, Siobhan.
Good, good. So,
That's not it. Oh God.
I would just start it, Alison. I would just. Oh. I have to fade it off.
For at least 5,000 years, the depths of winter has been a time for merrymaking and conviviality, to drive the cold winter away, as one Jacobean song had it. Many of the major world religions have festivals of light to counteract this darkest season of the year. And Christmas is one of the greatest, most splendid, and most loved of them all. For many, it is a season of special celebration and festivity, a spiritual journey of peace and hope, a magical time of tradition and mystery. It can involve weeks of preparation, decoration, cooking, and entertaining. We might think that our modern Christmas derives largely from the Victorians, who popularised Christmas trees, Christmas cards, and Father Christmas. But in fact, many of our traditions, such as eating mince pies, singing carols, and kissing under the mistletoe, date back to Tudor times and beyond. In Tudor times, people enjoyed the traditional good dinner and special festive fare. They went to church on Christmas morning, opened up their houses to family and friends, ate and drank as much as they could afford, and gathered around the fire toasting chestnuts. They played games, they danced, they told ghost stories, and they exchanged gifts. As today, Christmas was a time for gathering together, neighbourly meetings and invitations, good housekeeping and hospitality. In Tudor England, people celebrated Christmas for 12 days, sometimes longer. Christmastide began on Christmas Day and it ended on the 5th of January or on Twelfth Night. For agricultural workers, it extended until Plough Monday, the first Monday after the Feast of Epiphany on the 6th of January, when they went back to work. The chief feasts were Christmas Day, New Year's Day, and Twelfth Night and Epiphany. In 1038, we find the first use of the word Christmas when it was called Christ's Mass in an Anglo-Saxon text. But the traditional English Christmas had its origins in the 9th century when King Alfred the Great enshrined in law the importance of keeping the church's feasts and commanded that there should be a holiday on Christmas Day and the 12 days that followed. It was believed that the Magi had journeyed for 12 days to see the infant Jesus. In Tudor England, there was no partying before Christmas. People fasted until Christmas Eve. Advent, the 40 days before Christmas, was a season of atonement in which good Christians prepared themselves spiritually for the coming of Christ. They were supposed to do penance and fast. Christmas Eve itself was a day of abstinence when a final meal of fish was served. The pagan tradition of the Yule log, thought to derive from early Viking invaders, was widely observed. The men would go out on Christmas Eve and fell a tree in the woods and then drag the trunk back to the hearth, where the waiting household decorated it with ribbons and greenery. The Yule log was always lit with a piece of wood saved from the log used the previous year, and it was kept burning through the 12 days of Christmas. People believed that if it went out, bad luck would ensue in the coming year. Now I'm going to hand over to Siobhan for the next section.
So, decorations. The Tudors didn't decorate their house until Christmas Eve. On that day, adults and children went out into the cold woodlands to gather evergreens. The antiquarian John Stowe tells us that every man's house was bedecked with holly and ivy. Carrying them into the house brought good fortune, but doing so before Christmas Eve could be dangerous. It could invoke bad luck, as evergreens were invested with mystical properties. Now, that superstition dated back to the Druids. They believed that tree spirits dwelt in the greenery, and if they had to stay indoors too long, they would make mischief. The Druids used mistletoe in their winter solstice ceremonies, and for that reason, Christian churches banned the plant. It's appropriate that it's hung high as a decoration because it's a parasite that grows in trees. And you can see up here in the top left, you can see mistletoe actually growing at Hampton Court. Holly was also considered a sacred plant by the Druids. Evergreen leaves, bright red berries, symbolizing life and fertility. As Christmas gradually replaced the pagan Yule, holly became a symbol of Christ's crown of thorns. It was also believed to protect against witches and goblins. Holly and ivy have been the mainstay of English church decoration since at least the 15th century. Their purchase is mentioned in churchwardens' accounts. The clergyman and poet Robert Herrick wrote that bays and rosemary were also used as much as holly and ivy, but that is lost to us today. The church was well aware of the heathen connection with evergreens, and in some countries they were banned, but not in England. The royal palaces were adorned with holly, ivy, and bays, infused with spices, and spices had been popular since they were brought back from the Orient by medieval crusaders. Cinnamon, ginger, cloves, and nutmeg. They were costly, which was why for many they were a treat at Christmas. And even today, a lot of Christmas food contains spices. Oranges were used for decoration too, imported in their tens of thousands into England by Tudor times. Their shape is symbolic of Christ's domination over the earth, which is why they have traditionally been given as gifts. There were no Christmas trees in Tudor England. The chief decoration was the kissing bough, a ball of greenery made of evergreens and sometimes stuck with apples, and always with a sprig of mistletoe suspended from the ceiling. So here we can see the traditional kissing bough here. Legend has it that the German reformer Martin Luther invented the Christmas tree in the early 16th century. One winter's night, Luther was walking through a forest when he looked up and saw thousands of stars glinting jewel-like among the branches of the trees. The sight inspired him to set up a candlelit fir tree to remind his children of the starry heavens. While the custom of decorating a tree was to flourish in Germany, it did not become popular in England until the 19th century. If you want to get a real sense of a Tudor Christmas, you must visit Hampton Court in December. And you will see the traditional greenery of the season, entwined with dried fruit, berries and candles. And we'll be putting up the Christmas decorations pretty soon. Nothing is more evocative than natural evergreens and the Christmas scents of cinnamon, ginger, cloves and nutmeg mingled with oranges, pine and juniper, all just as it was 500 years ago when the Tudor monarchs kept Christmas there.
Deep within all the festivity, bustle and good cheer lay the quiet heart of the celebrations. As Christmas Day approached, there was devout expectancy, but also a fearful sense of the supernatural. In Tudor England, spirits were thought to roam free in the darkness before Christmas. In 1553, Thomas Kirchmeier wrote of the fear this could engender. For these 3 nights are always thought unfortunate to be, wherein they are afraid of sprites and cankered witches' spite, and dreadful devils black and grim, that then have chiefest might. Already there was an established Christmas tradition of telling ghost stories by the fireside, particularly on Christmas Eve. For centuries, the belief had lingered that the veil between this world and the next was thin at this time of the winter. This was the winter solstice. The winter solstice was in the week before Christmas, actually. It was the longest night of the year, and it was believed that then spirits would walk the earth. In Shakespeare's A Winter's Tale, Prince Mamilius declares, "A sad tale's best for winter. I have one of sprites and goblins." Yet it was believed that between Christmas Eve and Twelfth Night, the power of the newborn Christ would surmount that of the spirits. In Shakespeare's Hamlet, Marcellus, having seen the ghost of Hamlet's father, says, "Some say that ever 'gainst that season comes, wherein our Saviour's birth is celebrated. This bird of dawning singeth all night long, and then they say no spirit dare stir abroad. The night so wholesome, then no planets strike, no fairy tales nor witch hath power to charm, so hallowed and so gracious is the time." Many believe that at midnight on Christmas Eve, cattle and oxen would kneel in the dark, worshipping the newly born Christ child, and bees would come out of their hives to welcome him. Above everything else, the Tudor Christmas was a religious festival. It began with the vigil of Christmas Day, when the church bells rang out to invite the people to midnight mass. They found the sanctuary and the altar ablaze with candles as Christmas came in with all its mystery and wonder. In the train of the Lord of Misrule, there'll be more on him later, there was sometimes a character called Captain Christmas or Prince Christmas, whose role was to ensure that everyone made merry at Yuletide. By Tudor times, the tradition of an individual personifying Christmas, like Father Christmas today, was centuries old. The Saxons had welcomed in winter in the guise of King Winter or King Frost or Father Time, giving him a crown and an honoured place by the hearth. And that was in the hope, of course, that he would be kind to them. Norse tradition had it that at Yule, the god Woden came down to earth on his 8-legged horse, joined gatherings by the fire, and left gifts of bread and much goodwill, and in return, offerings were left out for him. He was even known as Yule Father. The Christian saint Nicholas, Bishop of Myra, is said to have thrown a purse of coins through the window of some poor girls who, lacking dowries, were about to resort to prostitution. He later became the patron saint of children, and his cult was very popular. All these elements would be present in the much later figure of Father Christmas or Santa Claus. A favourite character in the popular mumming plays was actually called Father Christmas, Old Christmas, or Old Man Winter. Clad in green and wearing a grotesque mask and a wig, he would rampage about, shouting and brandishing a great club, exhorting his audience to behave themselves and maintain the old customs of Yuletide. "Here comes I, old Father Christmas, welcome or welcome not. I hope old Father Christmas will never be forgot." And then sternly to the children in the audience, Who went to the orchard to steal apples to make gooseberry pies for Christmas? In 1616, the playwright Ben Jonson appeared in his own mask, Christmas, his mask, for playing Christmas, Old Christmas, Christmas of London, and Captain Christmas, with his drum beaten before him. This recalls the Mummers' Father Christmas, and the characters still carried a truncheon.
Christmas dinner. On Christmas Day, a lavish dinner would have been eagerly anticipated after the Advent fast. Most diners ate plum porridge as an appetizer, a thick broth of mutton or beef boiled with plums, spices, dried fruits, breadcrumbs, and wine. Centuries later, the Victorians would remove the meat from the and turn it into would remove the meat and turn plum porridge into the rich Christmas pudding we know today and serve it as dessert. For Christmas dinner, all classes enjoyed the seasonal favourite called brawn, fatty cuts of boar or pork, cooked in wine and served sliced and garnished, sometimes a sprig of yew whitened with egg or flour to make it look as though it had been dusted with snow. The most important course, however, was the boar's head. It would be carried in resplendent on its platter by the steward or the head of the household, with a blast of trumpets and the sound of drums and pipes. As the boar's head was carried into the hall, a carol would be sung. At least 4 celebrating the dish survive, but the best known is the Boar's Head Carol of 1521, and the custom continued at court until the reign of Queen Victoria. Here's the boar's head being carried in. The dish has been particularly associated with Queen's College, Oxford, where it has been served on the Saturday before Christmas since 1341, a tradition that continues to this day. It is in commemoration of a medieval student who, amazingly, fought off a wild boar armed only with a volume of Aristotle. For the poor, meat was a rare luxury, and they usually ate pork. But Christmas was a time when they might be lucky enough to sample richer fare, along with more leisure for dancing and merrymaking. For the better off, there might be a variety of meats and poultry, including larks, partridges, quail, swan, chicken, or goose. There is a record of the first turkeys arriving in England from the New World in 1526, when 6 birds were imported at Bristol and sold for 2d each. Most people thought they came from the East via Turkey, which is why it was called turkey cock. The French, however, thought it came from India, so they called it dandy. By the end of Elizabeth's reign, it was popular at Christmas, although it would be centuries before it ousted the traditional meats. Stuffing, known as forcemeat and made with egg, currants, pork and herbs, is first known to have been served in 1538, and Brussels sprouts were first recorded in 1587. Mince pies or Christmas pies were made with leftover meats, preferably mutton, in commemoration of the shepherds, to which suet, sugar, dried fruits and spices were added. Some pies were gilded, which harked back to the gifts of the Magi. A baby Jesus made of pastry might adorn the top of the pie, and the pastry case being fashioned to look like a crib. And that's what we can see here on the right, the little baby on the top of the pie. And such pies were called nativity pies. They were huge, unlike the small ones we eat today. Christmas pudding was also enjoyed in Tudor times as a kind of suet pudding. There's a delightful tradition in London's Middle Temple Hall. Elizabeth I once sent them a Christmas pudding, and in commemoration of this, a pudding was served every year using her recipe until 1966. In 1971, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, revived the tradition, stirring a new pudding for the lawyers. Every Christmas, our present Queen gives each member of her staff a Christmas pudding from Fortnum and Mason's, made from a special recipe for the royal household. I'm told that a few years back, in a bid to economise, the Queen tried Tesco, and it just wasn't the same. And for our guests overseas, Tesco is a very inexpensive supermarket in the UK. Not the same as Fortnum and Mason, so it wasn't the same. And she went back to Fortnum and Mason's for this very special Christmas pudding. There you go.
Long before the 16th century, old pagan traditions have been absorbed into Christian festivals. The actual date of Christ's birth is unknown, but the fact that Christmas falls around the same time as the winter solstice and the ancient Roman festival of Saturnalia is no coincidence. Saturnalia was the occasion for riotous feasting, drunkenness, mischief-making and games. Sounds like Christmas at my house. It was a time when formal roles were reversed, with masters waiting upon servants and a king chosen to keep rule over the festivities. And many of these elements remain part of the Christmas tradition. Throughout Britain, the Christmas period was a time for liberty, relaxation, and subverting the rules. One element of the Roman Saturnalia that survived was that of role reversal among the hierarchical ranks of society and between the sexes. For a few days, social barriers came tumbling down and restraint was set aside. In Scotland, the 12 days of Christmas were called the Daft Days. In great households, the 12 days of feasting, banqueting, pageantry, and convivial merrymaking were governed by the Lord of Misrule, or Master of Merry Disports, who acted as Master of Ceremonies. The Lord Mayor of London, cities, towns, and parishes all appointed their own Lords of Misrule. Philip Stubbs, a disappearing Puritan, has left an evocative description of Elizabethan Lords of Misrule. All the wild hotheads of the parish choose them a grand captain, whom they ennoble with the title My Lord of Misrule, and then they crown him with great solemnity. This king chooseth 100 lusty guts like himself to wait upon his lordly majesty and guard his noble person. And then they have their hobby horses, dragons, and other antiques, together with their bawdy pipers and thundering drummers. The Lords of Misrule were their most popular in early Tudor England. Even the monarch had to obey the Lord of Misrule's commands. Will Winesbury had the office in the first year of Henry VIII's reign and impudently asked his sovereign for £5 towards his expenses. If it shall like your grace to give me too much, he added mischievously, I'll give you none again, and if your grace give me too little, I will ask more. The king was greatly amused and probably obeyed. This seasonal role reversal extended to the church also. Prior to the Reformation, boy bishops replaced adult prelates and were allowed the same privileges as Lords of Misrule. Appointed on St. Nicholas's Day, the 6th of December, and allowed to hold office until Holy Innocents' Day on the 28th, they were chosen from cathedral choirs. They were invested with miniature vestments, often very costly, mitres and croziers, and they were deferred to as if they were real bishops. And they enjoyed actual episcopal power and took all the services an adult bishop would have taken apart from Mass. If they died in office, they would be buried with full vestments and the honours due to a real bishop. But there were many complaints that the boy bishops carried out their duties mischievously and without due respect, and that when they and their clergy went begging for alms at houses around the towns, they practiced what amounted to extortion. Nevertheless, they were protected by a law that forbade anyone to disrupt their services or throw things at them. That's Carol. It's me again. I do apologise, I've been told to come back. Our most popular Christmas carols date from Victorian times, although many have their origins in the more distant past. The Victorians often used old tunes that would have been known in Tudor times and harmonised them, sometimes adding new words. The First Noel and Goss Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen are both thought to date from the 16th century, while the tune of While Shepherds Watch Their Flocks was written by Christopher Tye, the musical advisor to King Edward VI, although the words are 17th century. In Tudor England, music was an integral part of the Christmas festivities. The Tudors themselves were passionate about music, which was seen as a necessary adjunct to royal magnificence. Under Henry VIII, English music progressed from the formal medieval style to one more florid and versatile, and most early Tudor music was polyphonic, having many voices or sounds. In this period, sacred music reached new heights of grandeur and intricacy in the hands of a few gifted composers under royal patronage, while secular music grew in popularity. Making music was considered an essential accomplishment for the upper classes, and many nobles employed their own bands of musicians. Even so, early 16th century music was far less sophisticated than that of later centuries. Few instruments survive, and sheet music is poorly annotated, so modern musicians have to realize each piece on reconstructed instruments. These instruments were not as finely tuned as they are now, and modern scales weren't developed until later in the century. The best-loved songs of the Christmas season were, of course, carols. Originally round dances with lively rhythms, these were sung and danced at many feasts of the church, especially Christmas. Carols were sung by groups of singers called the town waits, who were appointed by the civic authorities to provide music for ceremonial occasions. The waits tramped the night streets, singing for the pleasure of householders and hoping to be given food or money in exchange, like carol singers today. The first carols in English were translated or composed by Franciscan friars in the 13th century. One of the most enduring is Angelus ad Virginem, which dates from about 1250. The earliest surviving carols by English composers date from the 13th century, the 15th century, I beg your pardon. And that was a period in which the carol gained hugely in regard. One of the most favoured was the Cherry Tree Carol, also known as Joseph Was an Old Man. Another was Adam lay y bounden. The majority of carols celebrated the Nativity. They were songs of rejoicing, such as Make We Joy. There's a delightful everyday realism in the way the infant Christ and his mother are portrayed in these carols, as in the art of the day, as living mortals with whom ordinary people could identify. It is the three kings who appear as distant, majestic figures in contrast to the humble babe lying in a manger. This tender realism is particularly evident in the 15th century carol, Lule my liking, my dear one, my sweeting. Several carols that are still sung today originated in medieval Germany and would have been known in England well before the Tudor era. In Dolce Jubilo, of which an English translation appeared in 1540, is one of the most best known. Several carols do survive from Tudor times. Wynkyn de Word's Christmas Carols, published in 1521, is the earliest printed collection, although only one leaf of it with 2 carols survives in the Bodleian Library. The one, as Siobhan mentioned, is the famous Boar's Head Carol, as is and the less well known As I Outrode This Endless Night, from the pageant of the shearmen and tailors, from which the Coventry Carol also comes. In 1535, Von Himmelhoch, a Christmas carol that Martin Luther had written for his son, was published in Germany. It was certainly sung in Scotland and probably in England too, and today it's best known as Balulalo. At court, the gentlemen and children of the Chapel Royal would come before the monarch and sing carols. Sacred music at court, then as now, was the province of the highly trained elite choir of the Chapel Royal, which gloriously sang mass daily and performed regularly for the king, especially when he wished to entertain guests. Their voices, wrote an Italian visitor, are really rather divine than human. Most of the music sung by the Chapel Royal was composed by its talented members, among them the accomplished organist and composer William Byrd, who is often called the father of English music. For Christmas, he composed a carol motet, Out of the Orient Crystal Skies. It's one of the finest musical pieces of the English Renaissance, and when we hear it, we hear the voice of Elizabethan England. We are there. New Year's gift. New
Year's Day was a very special occasion. Kings and queens wore their crowns and their royal robes, went in procession to chapel, and then held court before presiding over yet another great feast. But anyone expecting presents on Christmas morning would have been disappointed. The giving of gifts had been a feature of the Roman Saturnalia, and the custom did survive, but presents were exchanged not on Christmas Day, but on New Year's Day. At the Tudor court, present giving was embraced wholeheartedly, and it was expected that everyone would give the monarch a gift. In the early Tudor period, these presents were presented in the bedchambers of the king and queen. We have Elizabeth of York here on the right-hand side. Her privy purse expenses show that she gave rewards to lords and servants who brought her New Year's gifts. Under the later Tudors, gifts were handed over in the presence chamber and afterwards displayed on sideboards for all to see. Excuse me. On New Year's Day, 1538, Master John Hussey came to court to deliver gifts. And I really love this little source because it's showing a softer Henry VIII, just as this painting, indeed, this pre-Holbein painting shows us the softer side of the king. Because Hussey writes about coming to court, coming into the chamber, finding Henry VIII leaning against a cupboard as courtiers come forward with their offerings. Beside Henry stood Thomas Cromwell, and at the other end of the cupboard, Henry's secretary, recording gifts on a scroll. When he saw Hussey, the king seemed genuinely pleased. He smiled warmly as the gift was presented, and he took longer than usual to express his thanks. Among the king's gifts on display, Hussey saw a clock fashioned like a book, velvet purses full of coins, costly carpets, dog collars, embroidered shirts, hawks' hoods, a gold trencher, 6 cheeses from Suffolk, and even a marmoset monkey. And we're getting this little image of Henry, you know, very relaxed, very happy. It was obviously something that the king enjoyed, people bringing him presents. One gift that undoubtedly pleased the king was Hans Holbein's superb portrait of the 2-year-old Prince Edward, and this was given to the king on New Year's Day, 1540. Gifts presented at court to Elizabeth I included jewels and purses of gold from great nobles, embroidered petticoats or sleeves from her ladies, a fair pair of quinces from the sergeant of the pastry, and boxes of sweetmeats from the clerk of the spicery. So you're getting the idea that people are giving what they can afford. Gift giving at court could be of great political significance. In 1532, after he had separated from Catherine of Aragon, whom he was determined to divorce, Henry accepted gifts from his sweetheart, Anne Boleyn, here on the right, and he rejected those from Catherine, commanding her not to send him any in future, for he was not her lawful husband, as she should have known. So this would be a very public way for the king to reject his first wife, by rejecting her gifts. The New Year's gift could also have been a means of regaining royal favour. In 1571, the Duke of Norfolk, while imprisoned in the Tower of London, sent Elizabeth a lavish jewel for a New Year's gift. It was rejected, and the Duke was later executed. In 1580, Sir Philip Sidney had displeased the Queen. He dared to suggest that she shouldn't get married when she was considering a French match. But after he presented her with a jewelled whip to demonstrate his subjection to her will, she quickly forgave him. The Tudor monarchs also gave gifts, usually items of plate such as cups and bowls, and each weighted according to rank. Every person at court, even the most menial members, got something. In 1 year, Henry VIII spent over £800. Now that's the equivalent of about £400,000 today on New Year presents. So if anyone thinks that they're overspending, believe me, you're not in the same league as Henry. New Year was also a time for reflection and resolving to do better. The modern tradition of resolutions was well established by 1667, when the diarist Samuel Pepys wrote on New Year's Eve, "I have newly taken a solemn oath about abstaining from plays and wine, which I am resolved to keep according to the letter of the oath which I keep by me." Within 3 weeks, he had broken it.
Traditionally, New Year's Eve was the occasion for games and recreation. The rich went hunting and enjoyed outdoor pursuits, but sport was heavily controlled by the government, and it was a rarity in the lives of people whose waking hours were filled with relentless manual work. In 1542, determined to maintain England's fearsome reputation for winning battles through the skill of its archers, Henry VIII passed a law banning all sports on Christmas Day except archery. He also enacted that working men and servants could play dice, cards, football, bowls, tennis, quoits, ninepins, and shovegroat only at Christmas. Small wonder that people threw themselves into the revelry with gusto, and there were complaints that cards and dice purged many a purse. The better off played chess or backgammon, guessing games, word games, dice and cards, with which huge sums might be won or lost, were widely enjoyed. Henry VIII once lost staggering sums of £100 playing cards with the gentlemen of the Privy Chamber and £450 at dominoes. That's nearly £200,000 today. Henry also enjoyed the aristocratic game of shovelboard. Ordinary mortals played another version, shove-groat, about later shove-halfpenny, in taverns. At court and in great houses, there will be shuttlecocks, skittles, fortune-telling, music, dancing, and paid entertainers such as acrobats, tumblers, and fire-eaters, as well as the jokes and antics of jesters. Parlour games, as later generations called them, were widely enjoyed at Christmas. Among the best known was hide and seek. In Love's Labour's Lost, written in 1598, Byron says, all hid, an old infant play." And Hamlet alludes to the game when he says, "Hide fox, and all after." The boisterous hoodman blind or blind man's buff was widely played. By Tudor times, blindfolds were used because in the Middle Ages, people had turned their hoods so that their faces were covered, and that's how the game got the name hoodman blind or blind man's buff. The most hazardous game, and please don't try this at home, was Snapdragon, which originated in Tudor times and was a favourite on Christmas Eve. Dried or candied fruits were placed in a bowl of warm brandy, which was then ignited, and the players had to snatch the fruits without burning their fingers. Now, this may be the origin of pouring brandy on the Christmas pudding and lighting it. And again, we do not recommend you try this at home. When the Thames froze over in 1564, people played football on the ice. Many courtiers shot daily at targets set up on the frozen water, and both men and women went daily on the Thames in great numbers until the ice began to thaw. In 1608, the river froze over again, and certain youths burnt a gallon of wine upon the ice, while one woman had an honest desire, a great longing to have her husband get her with child on the Thames. When the Thames froze over before Christmas 1536, Henry VIII and Jane Seymour, having attended a Christmas service in St Paul's Cathedral, spurred their horses across the frozen river and galloped to the Surrey shore, making for Greenwich Palace, where they would keep a lavish Christmas court.
So now we move on to Twelfth Night. Christmas culminated in Twelfth Night on the 5th of January, and people celebrated the arrival of the Magi with great feasts, games, and the staging of plays. If friends and relations had gone home after Christmas, they all came surging back for the culmination of the Yuletide season. For the banquet that marked Twelfth Night, an enormous cake was baked, containing fruit, flour, honey, and spices. Inside the cake was a bean and pea, and slices were offered to guests. The lucky man and woman who found the bean and the pea would be king and queen for the evening, leading the disports. In the 19th century, the Victorians would hark back to this tradition, adding silver coins or charms to their Christmas pudding. At court, there would be diverse interludes, rich masques and disports, and after that, a great banquet. In 1532, 200 dishes were served at Greenwich Palace. Twelfth night was the last night on which the Lord of Misrule held sway, so the festivities were riotous. The wassail cup, which contained spiced ale, was brought in by the Lord's steward and presented to the King and Queen, and then passed around the table. And this was practiced at all levels of society and derives from the Anglo-Saxon, meaning your good health. For poorer people, it meant a wooden bowl containing hot ale or cider with a crust of bread at the bottom. The crust was reserved for the most important person in the room, and it's the origin of the modern day toast when celebrating. There was a tradition for entertainments and disguisings to be staged on Twelfth Night. In 1510, Henry VIII and a band of noblemen put on a disguising at Westminster Palace, coming suddenly in a morning into the Queen's chamber, all apparelled in short coats of Kentish Kendal, with hoods on their heads like Robin Hood's men, whereof the Queen and her ladies were abashed. But when the musicians struck up a tune, they entered into the spirit of the occasion and danced with the outlaws. Drama was hugely popular at court, where productions could be spectacular. Shortly before Christmas 1600, Elizabeth I commissioned Shakespeare to write the comedy Twelfth Night, to be performed at the close of the festive season in Whitehall, and the Queen commanded that it be furnished with rich apparel, great variety and changes of music and dances. The play expanded on the disorder expected of the occasion and featured gender and status reversal, merriment, misrule and disguisings. Twelfth Night became a traditional time for all classes to go to the theatre. And incidentally, our pantomime that we enjoy here in this country today is a direct descendant of this kind of the Twelfth Night dramatics, with the gender and status reversal, merriment, misrule, disguisings, all those sort of themes are carried on in today's pantomime. The first playhouse opened in 1576 at Shoreditch, and by the end of the century, about 15,000 Londoners, possibly 1/5 of the city's population, were attending theatres every week. That is an astonishing statistics, with takings soaring over the Christmas period.
Some thought it bad luck to leave Christmas decorations up after midnight on Twelfth Night, when the power of the Christ child no longer held sway. But if the greenery was not put outside again, the spirits that dwelt in the branches would bring disaster to the household in the coming year. But in some places, up to the 19th century, the decorations were not taken down until Candlemas on the 2nd of February, when Jesus was presented in the temple on the Feast of the Purification of the Virgin Mary. The poet Robert Herrick warned what would happen if the decorations were not removed. Down with the rosemary, and so down with the bays and mistletoe, down with the holly, ivy, all, wherewith ye decks the Christmas hall, that so the superstitious find not one leaf branch left there behind. For look, how many leaves there be neglected there, maids, trust to me, so many goblins you shall see. When the Yule log was finally allowed to burn itself out at the end of the Christmas season, people would save a piece of it to light next year's log. And again, Herrick describes the custom. Kindle the Christmas brand, and then till sunset let it burn. When quenched, then lay it up again, till Christmas next return. Parts must be kept wherewith to tend the Christmas log next year, and where 'tis safely kept, the fiend can do no mischief there. And now the white loaf and the pie, and let all sports with Christmas die. For most people in Tudor England, Epiphany was the last great day of processions, feast, festivities and fun. At court, the Yuletide season officially ended on the 2nd of February with the solemn celebration of Candlemas, when the King and Queen went in procession to Mass. On this feast day, all the churches were alight with candles. Christmas was at an end, and it was time to clear up and get back to work. Sometimes Plough Monday fell on the 7th of January, St. Distaff's Day, a distaff being another name for a spindle, for it was on this day that women resumed their domestic duties. It stoppeth a gap and saveth a woman from being idle, one rather misogynistic observer wrote in his book of husbandry. Then as now, Robert Herrick describes how people got ready to go back to work. Partly work and partly play, ye must on St. Distaff's day from the plough soon free your team, then come home and fodder them. If the maids a spinning go, burn the flax and fire the tow. Bring in pails of water, then let the maids bewash the men. Give St. Dispel all the right, and then bid Christmas sport good night.
The essence of the Tudor Christmas survived the Reformation and even the banning of Christmas by the Commonwealth in this country. Christmas was seen by some reformers as pagan, but Martin Luther remained attached to the Nativity in the life of the Church, and most Protestants, including John Calvin, permitted Christmas. A notable exception was John Knox, the driving force behind the Scottish Reformation. He and the Puritans after him pointed out that nowhere in the scriptures was there any command to celebrate the birth of Christ, especially on the 25th of December. There was no evidence that Christ had been born on that date. The festival was abolished in Scotland in 1583, reinstated by James VI, and banned again in 1640. The Scots moved their celebration to New Year or Hogmanay. By contrast, Henry VIII's Reformed Church in England embraced Christmas with just a few changes. For example, the king banned the boy bishops in 1542, and the Advent fast was no longer observed. The reign of his son, Edward, had a much bigger impact on the religious rituals, as the Act of Uniformity eliminated vestiges of the old faith. Medieval wall paintings start to be whitewashed. Nativity scenes, saints and angels begin to disappear. Pre-Reformation accounts make special mention of lighting the rood loft and its large effigy of the crucified Christ. And we can see the rood loft here in the top left. And it's taken down in English churches at this time. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, those attending a Christmas Mass, which meant everyone, would now be listening to a service conducted in English from the Book of Common Prayer, written by Archbishop Thomas Cranmer, seen here on the left. But Edward's reign did not witness changes in the secular aspects of the 12-day feast. He kept an open table at Christmas and he enjoyed 12-night revels. They actually reached a peak of extravagance under the Duke of Northumberland, his chief advisor. Ordinary Tudors also continued their feasting, dancing, merrymaking, and misrule. At the end of Elizabeth's reign, the festive season at court was still as colourful as any earlier Tudor Christmas. The real attack on Christmas in England would come in the next century. Now, here we have Oliver Cromwell. It's a common myth that Oliver Cromwell banned Christmas, but it was actually the elected Parliament who criminalised the celebration, along with other holy days. They saw the festivities as relics of Catholic superstition, and in 1644 ordered that Christmas should no longer be observed. From Oxford, the wartime capital of Charles I, the royalist satirist John Taylor lamented in his pamphlet, The Vindication of Christmas, and he said, "Thus are the merry lords of misrule suppressed by the mad lords of Westminster." Parliament's order was ignored in parts of England held by the king, but the royal army was crushed at the Battle of Naseby, and with the defeat of the king, Christmas lost its most powerful defender. By Christmas 1648, Charles was a prisoner of Parliament. He was executed in 1649, and his body laid to rest at St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle, where he had kept his last Christmas. And in this Victorian painting, we can see the king, his body being taken into St. George's. Following Parliament's victory, the ban was rigorously enforced and churches were locked on Christmas Day. Public notices were nailed to trees. Many tried to resist the directive and staged riots. The diarist John Evelyn managed to attend a service in London in 1657, so that's a Christmas Day church service, a secret service, but soldiers surrounded the chapel and arrested everyone inside. Parliament had won, on the surface at least. However, they were much less successful in stopping people from gathering to sing carols and feast on special dishes. Although the Puritans had banned nativity pies, the latter soon reappeared, much smaller in size and without the cribs, to be renamed mince pies. It's clear the prohibition of Christmas was endured rather than embraced, and the secular pleasures of the season were covertly enjoyed as far as people were able to do so. With the restoration of Charles II in 1660, Christmas was restored as well to widespread joy. The parliamentarians had perceived it to be a threat, although they admitted that grand festivities and holy days are the main things which the more ignorant and common sort do fight for. They had associated Christmas customs with the royalist cause, but in the end, they did their regime no favours. Puritan influence was carried over to North America, where it had a stronger hold. The early colonists made Thanksgiving their most important holiday, and I know that you've got Thanksgiving coming up this Thursday. And for a long time, Christmas was suppressed. For example, up until 1681 in Boston, you could be fined 5 shillings for simply showing Christmas spirit, such as wishing someone a Merry Christmas. Similarly, in Scotland, Hogmanay was the largest celebration. And you may be surprised when I tell you that Christmas Day was not a public holiday in Scotland until 1958. With so many rituals of the old Roman Mass stripped away, it's a wonder that Christmas continued in Reformation England, but the simple reason for its survival was its widespread popularity at all levels of society. Christmas had outlasted the Reformation and Puritan rule as an ancient respite of warmth and pleasure in the bleakest time of winter. Most people in Tudor times viewed it just as we do today, a season of celebration and festivity, a spiritual journey of peace and hope, and a magical time of tradition and merrymaking to drive the cold winter away. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
lovely. Can you see?
So if I, there we go.
Okay, right.
Right, shall I? Yeah.
Oh, can you see?
No,
them?
no, no, no.
Okay, I'll see what I see. Right, ladies and gentlemen, hello. Now let me see. I'm just looking at this, really enjoying the. I'm looking for some questions. Do you want to run down?
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm just getting wonderful comments of thanks from everyone.
Glad you enjoyed it.
Yes, I think everybody had an absolutely wonderful time. So we're going to be taking some questions now. So everyone, please feel free to put your questions into the chat. That will be marvelous. Thank you. Let's have a look.
A hymn that you feel, oh yes, about the hymn. I mentioned a hymn about Elizabethan times evoking the spirit of it. It was Out of the Orient Crystal Skies by William Byrd, and it's absolutely beautiful. You can get recordings of it, and it's wonderful.
Oh, there's some more there, Alison.
Yes, can you see them?
Yeah.
So there's a question there about, could the boy bishops hear confessions?
Yes, they could. Goodness knows what they made of them or what they advised as a penance, you can imagine. And somebody said, can you talk about the dancing that accompanied the carols? These would have been round dances where people just got into a circle and started dancing around. I imagine there's a certain freedom about how they dance to them, and that sort of thing. Gradually over the centuries, people stopped dancing to carols and they became more sacred.
Anyone else?
I'm just trying to see if there are any more because I can't see.
Thank
you for all the nice comments, please.
Yes, the mad dancing. Any other questions? What's your favourite tradition from Tudor Christmas times?
Oh, yeah.
Well, I like all the greenery, the natural decorations. As I was describing in the royal palaces, the smells, the cinnamon, the juniper, the pine. it's just so beautiful and so evocative. And I kind of think it's a bit of a shame in a way that we turned to synthetic decorations in probably the 1950s.
Yes, we did. Well, I mean, the first artificial trees, what, 1930s?
Well, yeah. But I think in the 1950s, synthetic decorations became very cheap, very affordable, and they really took off. So prior to the 20th century, everything was natural, which I think is really nice. And
you can still do it nowadays, especially if you live in the country. It's much easier then.
Yeah.
But I think I like just like everybody getting together and seeing people, those we love, and having a good time. And also I love carols. I did a lot of research on carols. I have hundreds of medieval and Tudor carols on my playlist.
Something that I would say is my least favourite part of Christmas is the commercialisation of it.
It starts so early. The concept of Advent has just gone.
And as Alison was saying, I think for the Tudors, it was getting together, having some time from what would be for most people a lot of really hard work, having some time off, dancing, getting some treats, a bit nicer food, but getting together with your family, and that's what's important. Even for the Victorians, actually, it didn't really become commercialised until the late 19th century, because originally the Victorian Christmas trees used to just contain tiny gifts like gingerbread and candy that were actually placed on the tree. And it was only at the end of the 19th century, when the retailers got involved, that presents got bigger and bigger, and then they had to be put under the tree. And it all became much more commercialised. But it started off with just tiny little Christmas gifts.
And there's another question about, were the presents actually wrapped during Tudor times?
No, we didn't find that. There's no evidence of that. And I've looked for this when I've written about people giving gifts on other occasions in Tudor times. And there's nothing. And I've just imagined them wrapping them in beautiful fabric or something if you were wealthy. I don't think they were. I think they were just presented as they were.
And certainly, when I was reading you about Hussey, the gifts there, in the presence chamber, very much all open and on display for everyone to see, because it's all about showing off, what you're giving to the king.
Any more questions?
Thank you. I think I'm just checking in the Q&A. Yes, there might be another couple of questions. If anyone has any last minute questions, go ahead. We're also going to be actually gifting two very lucky participants in our audience a signed copy of A Tudor Christmas and a signed copy of
Catherine Howard, my latest novel.
Fantastic. Absolutely wonderful. So stand by for that announcement. Let's have a look. So we've got so many participants, and thank you all so much for tuning in.
Yes, it's delightful. Lovely.
Just having a look at our list of names here. So
all right. So
for A Tudor Christmas, I believe there's a young man called Dylan.
Oh, is it Dylan? Yeah, Dylan Sparrow.
Yes.
I know Dylan. He's come to a lot of events and knows a lot, probably more about Tudor history than I do. So this is Dylan
Sparrow. Yes, there he is. Hello.
Dylan. Oh, good.
He's the winner of A Tudor Christmas, a signed copy. So congratulations to him.
There we are, Siobhan.
That's live right now.
Right, lovely. Congratulations, Dylan.
Congratulations, Dylan.
And for the second signed copy of A Tainted Queen, I believe there's is it a gentleman called Simran Takar?
All right. If we can you spell that for me, so I can sign?
Simrin. Simran.
S-I.
It's a lady, Miss
hello.
Miss Simran Takar.
So it's S-I-M-R-I-N.
S-I-M-R-I-N. congratulations. You've won the...
Thank you. Yes, and congratulations, Simran. There we are. Now, if you would like to email me through my website or tomorrow, there's an email address, info@alisonweir.org.uk. Go to the contact page. You'll find my email address and send me your address. I'll send the books on to you, okay? So it's info@alisonweir.org.uk. Or it's World Wide Web, alisonweir.org.uk.
Or you can, if it's easier, you can just email Alison Weir Tours.
Yes.
And I'll pick it up. But we need your addresses. Thank you.
Or you can message me through Facebook.
Wonderful, congratulations. So Christmas has come early there. Just seeing if there are any last minute questions in the chat. Oh, there's one more about Tudor Christmas. Was it mainly for adults or was it a family, children-centered event?
Very much a family thing, very much, yes.
Yeah.
I imagine children got very excited about it.
So that hasn't changed much then. And also a question about the so-called pagan rituals. Which of the pagan rituals would you say were the most well-known?
Well, I'm not so much about well-known. They were aware of the descent from these. I think it was the evolution. These carried on. I don't think they were aware that they were emulating the Saturnalia, for example, which is or the Norse and Anglo-Saxon rituals.
So the idea of the present giving comes from Saturnalia. But probably the most obvious is the traditional plants, as I was describing,
They're very old, very ancient.
the holly and the ivy and the mistletoe, as I explained, goes back to the Druids.
I think they were aware they were very ancient, all these traditions. I think they were aware of that, but they probably didn't know exactly where they had come from.
And also the yew tree. The yew tree is quite a significant tree, isn't it?
I didn't come across you, did you, when we were doing our researches? I think it was. I mean, it had meant to have many magical and quite dangerous properties as well.
Okay,
but not so much for Christmas.
But we hadn't found that.
Yeah, but also you've got to remember that the trees were not a feature of the English Christmas. They were in Germany.
Although we do have one instance in the 15th century of a tree with lights on or candles being set up on a London street. And that's before Martin Luther. One instance. Probably someone just had an idea of doing it.
So the Christmas tree doesn't actually take off in this country properly until the reign of Queen Victoria.
No, that's true. I mean, it was a German tradition that evolved from Martin Luther. Queen Charlotte had one up at Windsor in the 18th century. They did a replica of it. It looked very, very sparse and that. Yeah. But it was when Albert came and Victoria adopted the German custom. And there was an illustration in the Illustrated London News in 1848. Yeah. And it showed the king, the queen and the prince consort and their children around this Christmas tree. Yeah. And everybody had to have a Christmas tree after that.
So the Victorians gave us a lot of what we know today, such as Christmas trees and cards and crackers. But as we explain in the book, a surprising amount actually does go back to the Tudors. It's not all Victorian.
No. Yeah. I was quite surprised to find out all this about Father Christmas and Captain Christmas. You know, that we got a personification of Christmas centuries before Santa Claus and Father Christmas.
And just one more question here about the poorer people. Were they able to celebrate Christmas?
They did to the best of their ability, didn't they? I mean, you know, they wouldn't have been able to celebrate on a grand scale. Whether they would have had enough food to celebrate all 12 days is another matter.
What I find interesting, though, is that they had 12 days of Christmas, during which no free man could be compelled to work. And you know, that's a lot more than the Victorians got. They were lucky to get one day off, Christmas Day. And nowadays, certainly in this country, we do tend to have quite extended...
We're going back to the 12 days,
aren't we? So a lot of people take time off between Christmas and New Year. So we're having these extended festive holidays, the kind of holidays that the Tudors had. But for centuries, the Georgians and the Victorians, they just didn't do that. They maybe had just one day. On Christmas Day.
And we've lost 12th night as well.
Yes, of course.
That was a huge feast. Yeah, we've lost that. And Holy Innocents, we don't observe that. They were all celebrated, but as I say, there were 4 main feasts.
Thank you so much. Just one more question, just keep squeezing in an extra question about Boxing Day. Do we know where Boxing Day came from?
Well, I think it's from the boxes in the
alms boxes
in churches that were opened, but and so it's connected with charitable giving, which Christmas still is today. The idea of giving at Christmas time, giving to charity. So the boxes were opened on Boxing Day and distributed to the poor. That's where the idea comes from.
Okay.
Anything else?
Well, wonderful. Thank you again. Just lots of thanks coming in from everyone.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
So thank you, ladies, so much, and
Enjoyed it.
An absolute honour to be hosting. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you.
Yes, everyone, please do get in touch if you'd like any more information on Beyond Curated and the private experiences that we design very creatively, virtually and in person, when we can welcome you all back to London. So thank you again. And this recording will be available. We'll make sure that that gets to you if you'd like to watch this again. And
if you send us the link, that would be great. Thank you. Then we can publicise it.
Yes, and hopefully it'll find its way onto Beyond Curated's YouTube channel, where we have a few other webinars.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Enjoy, including our wonderful our behind the tower walls, which we hosted in the summer with Siobhan and Alison. So you can watch that on the Beyond Curated YouTube channel as well. So thank you again so much to everyone.
Can I just answer another question? A lady's asking us, is Tudor Christmas available in the US?
Sadly not, no. Sadly.
Oh, and where can they buy it?
Can they buy it on Amazon? Yes, it wasn't published in the US.
No, but yes, you can buy it. You just have to buy it on Amazon.
Yeah.
But what Alison's saying is there wasn't a US version, so the spelling will be, it'll be UK,
British spelling,
British, but you can get it. If you
we are hoping one day to do a Victorian Christmas, which we'd like to do.
Oh, lovely.
I'd like to do a medieval one, a Georgian one,
Yeah.
And so on.
Oh, there's another question here from Carrie, who's one of our guests, and Carrie's saying, were Victorian Christmas trees hung upside down? And yes, they were at Windsor Castle. That was a German. Yeah, that was a German. Yeah, not all of them, but some were hung, suspended from the ceiling at Windsor Castle. But it was very much a German thing, and it was just something that they did at Windsor Castle with the royal family, but it just didn't catch on. Not in this country anyway.
It's now quite fashionable though. You do get
I think there's a scene in the in Victoria in the series that was on television, and there's a scene where Prince Albert has hung all the Christmas trees upside down.
Right, okay. Yeah, I haven't seen that, but that's obviously where people
There is a lovely Christmas special for that. It's a lovely series.
Yeah.
Highly recommended.
Yeah, and then another lady's asking, were the poorer people able to celebrate? Was it mainly the wealthy? But again, it really just depends on what people could afford.
Like today, people celebrate according to what they can do.
Yeah. I think also what we need to remember is that for everyone at that time, you've got to put the religion back. This is a religious festival, and
well, to begin with.
So
there was solemn services to begin with, midnight mass on Christmas morning, and then they went riotous.
Do we have time for another question about wreaths on front doors?
Well, they may have been part of the decoration. We haven't seen them referred to specifically.
No.
But they may have made wreaths. There's
nothing,
we don't know in all the ways. It's not specified the ways they use the greenery creatively. So possibly they did. Yeah,
when we know that they brought all the greenery inside. It's quite possible
where they put it and what they did with it is another matter.
It's quite possible that they decorated outside as well. Okay. Oh, well, thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank
everyone. Have a lovely Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.